I like it because I know one thing for certain is that if you do get married, you must commit yourself to that.
Cliff Richard was not always Cliff Richard. He was born as Harry Roger Webb on October 14, 1940, in a hospital in Lucknow, British India. During the time of World War II, his family lived in the colony while the British Empire was still controlling India. But things were changing quickly. In 1947, India became independent and violence broke out in many places. British families started leaving, including Harry's. The Webbs took a slow boat back to England. It wasn't a fancy trip they were. Packed on a ship with other families for weeks, heading to an unfamiliar country. When they arrived in England, they had to adjust to a whole new life. They lived in a small house in Surrey with no more warm Indian weather or large homes. Life was cold and hard, but this new beginning shaped young Harry's character. He wanted to prove himself in this new land. He had music in his heart and ambition in his soul. He began performing and caught the eye of a talent manager who told him to change his name. Harry Webb doesn't sound like a rock star, the manager said. So he became Cliff Richard, Cliff for strength and Richard as a tribute to Little Richard. In 1958, at just 18 years old, Cliff released his first big song, Move It. It was loud, energetic, and unlike anything British teenagers had heard before. It reached number 2 on the charts and was called the first true British rock and roll song. Even John Lennon of the Beatles later admitted, before Cliff Richard and Move It, there was nothing worth listening to in England. Cliff had opened a door. He became a teen idol almost overnight. Crowds went wild, girls screamed. Boys tried to dress like him, and newspapers called it Cliff Mania. He wasn't just a singer. He was a movement. Over the next few years, Cliff kept releasing hit after hit, including Living Doll, Travelin' Light, and many more. He wasn't copying American artists anymore. He was a leader in his own right. He made people feel alive and hopeful during a time when Britain was still recovering from war, but Cliff wanted more than just singing. He acted in movies like Serious Charge and Espresso Bongo, showing that he had real talent beyond music. In 1963, his movie Summer Holiday became a box office hit. Fans rushed to see it, and the songs from the film ruled the music charts. At that time, no one could touch Cliff Richard in Britain. Even though the Beatles were becoming huge stars, Cliff still managed to compete with them. In 1964, Cliff had 6 top 10 hits in the UK, while the Beatles had 5. Paul McCartney even admitted that the Beatles went to Hamburg because Cliff had everything sewn up in Britain. Cliff Richard had become more than just a star. He was the foundation of British pop music. His success was not a fluke. It was the result of hard work, good music, and deep connection with fans. By the mid-1960s, Cliff was the biggest name in British music. But he was also preparing for a change that would surprise everyone. Faith, comebacks, and reinvention. In 1966, Cliff made a bold decision that shocked many of his fans. During a massive event with American preacher Billy Graham, Cliff Richard announced that he had become a Christian. This wasn't just something he kept private. He spoke about it on stage, in front of thousands of people, and on television. In the world of rock music, which was known for rebellion and breaking rules, Cliff's decision to speak openly about his faith was not normal. Some people thought this would ruin his career. Some fans were confused. Music executives worried that he might stop performing altogether. Cliff even thought about leaving the music industry to become a religious teacher. But after a lot of thinking and soul-searching, he realized he didn't have to choose between music and his faith. He could have both. This was something no British pop star had done before. He created a new path for himself, being honest about his beliefs while still making hit music. This honesty gave Cliff new energy. He said his confidence grew and the pressure to pretend was gone. He didn't feel like he had to act like a rebel anymore. He could be real. In the 1970s, Cliff's career had some ups and downs. In 1975, for the first time, he didn't have a single song in the music charts. People began to say that Cliff's time was over. But then, in 1976, he shocked everyone with a song called Devil Woman. It was different, darker, louder, and full of energy. It told a story about a mysterious woman and felt like a new side of Cliff. It became his first big hit in the U.S. and sold over 2 million copies. Even hard rock legends like Jimmy Page and Eric Clapton showed support for Cliff's new music. Cliff had reinvented himself. He wasn't just the clean-cut singer anymore. He was a serious artist. Critics and fans alike took notice. In 1987, Cliff released Always Guaranteed, a modern-sounding album that sold over 1 million copies. His Christmas single Mistletoe and Wine came out in 1988 and quickly became the biggest holiday song of the year. It sold 750,000 copies in just a few weeks. And it kept earning money even decades later. In 1989, Cliff released his 100th single, a huge milestone no other British singer had reached at that point. To celebrate, he held a special concert at the Royal Albert Hall. Fans voted on their favorite songs, and Cliff performed them live. That year, he also performed at Wembley Stadium at a massive show called The Event. It was half a tribute to his early days and half a celebration of his more recent success. It was more than just a concert, it was a statement. Cliff Richard had been in the music business for over 30 years, and he was still going strong. By 1999, Cliff was still breaking records. He released Millennium Prayer, a song that mixed the Lord's Prayer with the melody of Auld Lang Syne. Many radio stations refused to play it. Some said he was too old. Others said the song didn't fit with modern pop music. But Cliff didn't need radio stations. Fans bought the song anyway, and it went straight to #1 in the UK. It stayed there for 3 weeks and became his 14th chart-topping single. He proved that age didn't matter. What mattered was the love and support of his fans. Millennium Prayer wasn't just a hit, it was a message to the music industry. Cliff Richard wasn't going anywhere. His music, his faith, and his story were still important. He had stayed true to himself, and the fans respected that. Heartbreak, scandal, and survival. While Cliff's career was filled with music, movies, and chart success, his personal life was often lonely. He never married. In his 2020 autobiography, he revealed a secret he had kept for years. He had fallen in love with Olivia Newton-John, the famous Australian singer and actress. They had worked together on his television show in the 1970s, and Cliff said he felt an instant connection. But Olivia was already engaged to someone else. Bruce Welch, Cliff's bandmate from The Shadows. The timing was never right. Olivia and Bruce eventually broke up, but Cliff never got the chance to be with her. He said that Olivia was the one that got away. Despite the emotional pain, they remained close friends for over 50 years. Their voices blended beautifully, and their performances together were magical. In 2015, during Cliff's 75th birthday concert, they sang Suddenly one last time at Royal Albert Hall. In 2022, Olivia passed away after a long battle with cancer. Cliff was heartbroken. He said that she didn't die, she just stopped living. That was how much she meant to him. But the most painful moment in Cliff's life came not from love, but from a scandal that shook him to his core. In August 2014, while Cliff was relaxing at his home in Portugal, he saw something shocking on the news. Helicopters were flying over his house in Berkshire. Police were raiding his home, and the BBC was filming it live. The whole world was watching. Cliff had been accused of a crime that he did not commit. A man claimed that Cliff had assaulted him at a religious rally back in 1985. But the story fell apart quickly. The room the man described didn't even exist at that time. There were witnesses, including police officers, who said Cliff had never been alone, yet for 22 months the investigation dragged on. Cliff lost weight, developed shingles, and fell into a deep depression. He said he didn't feel safe in his own home. He felt dirty, like everything around him was poisoned. It wasn't just the police investigation, it was how it was done. The BBC had been tipped off by the police before the raid. They called it the money shot, meaning it would get them views and headlines. Cliff's personal life was turned into a TV show. Eventually, the case was dropped. There was no evidence. Cliff was innocent, but the damage was already done. His name had been dragged through the mud. His face had been shown on screens all over the world during a humiliating police search. Even though he had done nothing wrong, some people still looked at him with doubt. Cliff sued the BBC, and he won. The judge said that Cliff had a right to privacy and that the BBC had gone too far. They were ordered to pay him over $2 million in damages, but money couldn't fix what had happened. Cliff said he felt like a piece of him had been taken away. He never got back the 2 years he lost. He never got back the trust that was broken. He said, "I've been smeared, not by the police but by the media." Even worse, after the raid aired, someone tried to blackmail Cliff using the fake story. That person was arrested, but the system had already failed Cliff in every way. Despite all of this, Cliff Richard didn't give up. He kept performing, he kept recording. In 2023, he released another album, Cliff with Strings, My Kind of Life. It included a live tribute to Olivia. Cliff had been through more than most people could ever imagine: fame, love, loss, false accusations, and public shame. Yet he stood tall. He had survived the spotlight, the silence, and the storm. His voice still carried the same strength it had when he was 18. His faith still guided him. His fans still loved him. And now, after all this time, we finally know why Cliff Richard disappeared. He didn't vanish because he was forgotten. He was pushed into the shadows. But like the true legend he is, he never stopped shining. The legacy of Cliff Richard, a life of resilience, faith, and endurance. Cliff Richard's life has been a journey filled with triumphs, heartbreaks, and challenges that would have broken many people. Yet, through every rise and every fall, he has remained a symbol of resilience, grace, and enduring talent. When we look back at his story, we see more than a rock star. We see a man who refused to let the world define him. A man who stood firm in his beliefs, who survived public shame, who never stopped singing even when his voice was nearly drowned out by lies, from a young boy leaving India on a crowded ship to becoming Britain's first rock and roll sensation. Cliff was never handed success, he earned it. He helped build the foundation on which British pop music still stands. Before the Beatles, before the Rolling Stones, there was Cliff. And unlike many stars who shone brightly and faded, Cliff has lasted not just years but decades. His music, his faith, and his quiet strength kept him standing while others stumbled. He didn't just live through 5 decades of pop culture. He conquered them. What makes his story even more powerful is that Cliff's life off stage was often more dramatic than anything he sang about. His unspoken love for Olivia Newton-John, the one that got away, was a silent heartache that lasted a lifetime. He never married, never had children, and yet he touched millions of lives through his music. His friendships, particularly with Olivia, were built on love, loyalty, and lasting respect. Even in her final days, she spoke to him with warmth and joy, reminding him of a connection that time could never erase. That kind of devotion is rare, and Cliff held on to it quietly, gracefully, and with deep love. But love wasn't the only emotion that shaped his life. Pain and betrayal also carved deep scars into Cliff's heart. The 2014 police raid and the false allegation brought him to his knees. At the age of 77, a man with a clean record and a respected legacy became the face of one of the most shameful media moments in modern UK history. The world saw a private man's dignity stripped away on live television, not because he was guilty, but because the media wanted ratings. That moment didn't just hurt Cliff, it hurt every person who believed in truth, justice, and decency. And yet he didn't respond with anger. He responded with strength. He took legal action not to seek revenge, but to seek justice, not just for himself, but for anyone who might face the same cruelty in the future. When Cliff Richard stood in court and spoke about the damage done to his soul, his voice shook, but it did not break. He spoke not as a victim, but as a survivor. And when the judge ruled in his favor, it wasn't just a victory for Cliff, it was a victory for privacy, for dignity, and for the human spirit. Cliff has always walked a different path. While others chased fame, he chased purpose. While others lived fast, he lived intentionally. His faith, often mocked or misunderstood in the world of rock and roll, became his compass. It guided him when critics doubted him. It sustained him when the world turned away. He showed that you could be spiritual and successful, humble and famous, faithful and fearless, all at once. That balance is what set Cliff apart from others. He didn't need scandals to sell records. He didn't need controversy to stay relevant. He just needed his truth and a song to sing, and that's what Cliff Richard gave us, his truth. In every note, in every lyric, in every performance, he gave his fans memories that became part of their lives. Songs that played at weddings, during heartbreaks, at Christmas, in celebration, and in quiet reflection. He gave joy when people needed it and peace when the world felt chaotic. Even today, his songs continue to echo through radios, televisions, and hearts. Generations of fans, from teenagers in the 1950s to young listeners today, still find something real in his music. In many ways, Cliff's life is a story of silence, of things never said, of love never confessed, of pain endured behind closed doors. But it's also a story of sound of music, of laughter, of thousands of fans singing along in packed stadiums. His voice has become a thread woven through Britain's cultural fabric. It has endured war, cultural revolutions, media attacks, and personal heartbreak. That's not just the mark of a musician. That's the mark of a legend. As we reflect on Cliff Richard's incredible journey, from a child leaving a collapsing empire to a man who stood tall through a collapsing media system, we realize that he's never truly vanished. He may have stepped away from the spotlight at times, but his presence has never disappeared, because true stars don't fade, they endure. They evolve. They outlast every rumor, every betrayal, every false headline. Cliff Richard is one of those stars, and maybe, just maybe, his greatest legacy isn't the number of hits he had or the records he sold. Maybe it's the quiet message his life sends to all of us, that you can live with dignity even when the world tries to shame you, that you can believe in love even when it doesn't work out, that you can rise again even after the worst storms. Cliff Richard didn't just survive the music industry, he outlived it, outclassed it, and redefined it. So the next time you hear one of his songs, whether it's Devil Woman, We Don't Talk Anymore, or Mistletoe and Wine, remember the man behind the music, remember his story. And remember that sometimes silence isn't a disappearance. It's a quiet strength. Cliff Richard didn't vanish from the spotlight because he was done. He simply let the world catch up.